And if you would please state your full name.
William Francis Woodward III.
You may proceed.
All right, thank you. Mr. Woodward, let me start with, what is your relationship to the defendant, William Theodore Woodward?
A little softer, please. It's coming a little loud. Can you turn it down a little bit?
Can I turn it down? Are you having trouble hearing me, sir?
No, I can hear you fine.
Okay.
I'm just...
Mr. Woodward has an implant, and there's sometimes resonance from the
Electronic.
court system.
Okay.
Let me see if I can
There we go.
avoid amplification with that and speak loud enough so that you and the jury can hear.
I can hear that just perfect.
Perfect.
Okay.
Sir, could you state your relationship to William Theodore Woodward?
He is my oldest son.
Mr. Woodward, would you briefly tell the jury a little bit about your background and experience?
Well, when I got out of high school, I was doing construction work and went off to New York to work for a highway department up there, and decided while I was up there that I wanted to go into police work. Came back to Titusville, Florida, and started with the Titusville Police Department in 1972. After breaking my back in 2 places in 1977, the doctor thought it was a good idea to get out of that line of work, and I did. I went out to Kennedy Space Center in security, and after managing their law enforcement section for a couple of 3 years, I went over, transferred over to operations as a test conductor on a firing room console, and then I went back out in the field as a buried utility locator, requiring electrical engineering, or not electrical engineering, but industrial electricity in order to be familiar with the operation of the equipment. Got laid off in 2008, and I went back to work for the County Property Appraiser's Office in 2009 as a fraud investigator in homestead exemption, and I worked there until August of 2015. 2015, I think. Yeah.
Throughout the time that you were a Titusville police officer, you continued to be certified as a law enforcement officer.
Yes, sir. I had full state certification to be a uniformed police officer, plainclothes police officer with full arrest authority.
Okay. Now, Mr. Woodward, particularly during the time that you were an officer with the Titusville Police Department, what was William Woodward's age, and was he living in that household?
He was living in our household. He was born in 68, 72. He was 4. He was 4 years old, and when I left the PD, another 8 years later, he was 12, 13.
Now, as part of his upbringing, and you as a police officer, did you raise him to cooperate with law enforcement?
Yes, sir, I did.
Now, I want to move you up a little bit to the events of 2012, and more particularly, the events around August 5th, 2012. Do you recall that time period?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay. Did there come a point in time when a dispute began between the Hembrees, Piciors, the Blakes, and their significant others, and your son and his family?
Yes, sir.
Were you actually part of that dispute in terms of actions taken against you and your wife?
Yes, sir. I became part of that. About 1 o'clock on August the 5th, 1 p.m., when my daughter-in-law called me and said, "Bill, can you get over here? Something bad's happening."
Let me stop for a moment. You told us 1 p.m., but you didn't tell us the date.
August the 5th.
Okay, so you actually got called into it as early as August the 5th. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, I don't want you to repeat what someone else told you.
Right.
They may be testifying. They'll fill it in. But as a result of that telephone call, did you actually go over to your son's house?
Yes, I did.
Could you describe to the jury what you saw when you got there?
I arrived about 3 or 4 minutes after Barbara called me. We lived just around the block. And when I pulled up, stopped my truck, and I observed my son sitting on the north side of Smith Lane in a driveway of a vacant house. He was sitting in a lawn chair. And on the other side of the road, in the yard, right up against the sidewalk, what looked to be about 10 people or more. And when I got out, they were all yelling and screaming, and my son said a few things. And at that point, I walked over to my son, and I said, "Son, are you okay?" And he said, "Yeah, Dad." He said, "I'm not doing too bad."
Again, don't repeat what someone else said.
Right.
Just what you did or what you observed.
Objection is sustained. You may continue, sir.
Okay. I asked him if he was all right. I then was told a few minutes later.
Objection. Telling him. I'm not absolutely sure because it may depend on who told him and what it was. But again, I don't want you, if you can avoid talking about what other people said, put it more in the context of what you observed.
Okay.
I would appreciate that. That's what we want to share with the jury.
Okay, what I observed was the people on the other side of the road and my son on one side of the road, and that was what I observed.
Okay. Now, the nature of the comments that were being directed against your son, generally, did they concern you?
Yes, they did.
What were your concerns after hearing these comments directed toward your son?
The comments were very vicious in nature. They were violent. They were just things that had been a long time since I'd heard any kind of thing like that before. I didn't know some of these words that I was hearing, and I hadn't been familiar with them for years. But they were just very violent, talking about all kinds of different weapons and stuff, and that's what I remember from that.
Okay. Now, as a result of hearing these violent comments and these different statements, did you have any concern for your son's safety, your daughter-in-law's safety, or your grandchildren's safety?
Yes, sir, I did. I had concern for all of them safety. As it stood, my son was far outnumbered, and his daughter and his son and his wife were not that far away. Something could have happened, and we could have lost all of them, it appeared to me.
Okay. Now, after the 5th, did there come a point in time where you saw similar conduct like this directed toward your son and his family?
Yes, sir.
When was that you personally observed?
A couple of days after the 5th, we had a good rain shower, and the rain had washed some sand away from the area between his sidewalk and the gutter at his house. And we went over there to see if they were okay. I went and got a shovel and went down by the street and started shoveling the sand back up on the area between the sidewalk and the gutter. I didn't want my son down there because there were already 2 or 3 of the adults down by the sidewalk on that side of the road. And they were kind of taunting and yelling, like, "Come on over here and let's see what we got," and things like that. And I was close enough to hear that. And at one point, Roger Picior came across the yard to the area right around the sidewalk and yelled, I need to cave that old man's head in. I just think I'll cave it in. And
Speaking about you,
sir?
You take it as directed toward you?
I was the only one there, yes. It was sitting at me. He was looking straight at me. So I stopped what I was doing with the shovel, and I held the shovel, and I faced him. Because I thought if this is going to be a confrontation, I don't need to be turning my back on him.
Now, let me stop you for a moment.
Okay.
What is your age at this time?
5.5 years ago, 64, 65.
Okay. Your height and weight about that time?
About 215, 220.
Okay. How tall are you?
Right now I'm 5'11".
Shrinking?
Yeah.
I'm experiencing that as well. All right.
Yeah, I came down from 6'2".
Okay. Mr. Picior was significantly taller than you, correct? Yes, no? You have to
Yes.
answer out loud.
Yes, sir.
Significantly heavier than you.
Sustained.
What would you estimate Mr. Picior's height and weight as?
He looked to be about 6'3", 6'4", and probably 250, 260 pounds.
Okay. Did you have any concerns for your own personal safety as a result of Mr. Picior's comments directed toward you?
Yes, I did.
And what were those concerns? Please tell the jury.
Concerns were that I was not only
Objection, relevance.
Overruled. You can answer.
Go ahead, sir.
my concerns were not only that I was underweight compared to him and I was shorter, I was also quite a bit older, and I had suffered a broken leg in 2011. And of course, my broken two vertebrae in my back in 1977. And I've had 2 hernias replaced and 2 knee operations, so I didn't feel like it was going to be a very equal contest, but I was willing to protect my son.
Now, was your son in a position where he was able to observe and hear these threats directed toward you?
I don't know where my son was at that moment. I don't know if he was standing up in the yard. I wouldn't watch him back there. I was simply watching across the street to see if I was going to have to move quickly or do something else.
Did there come a point in time between when this happened, around August 7th or so,
Yes, sir.
and September 2nd on into the early morning hours of the 3rd, that you and your son had discussed this incident so that you knew from your own personal experience he was aware of what had been done to you?
Yes, sir. There was one other incident that happened.
But we'll get to that in a moment. I want to talk about this one in particular. Did you discuss this one with your son? Did he know about it? Was it part of his consciousness on September 2nd?
Yes, sir, he did.
Okay. And you had shared your concerns and your fears on that day with him at a later time, at least?
Yes, sir.
Now, you were about to tell the jury about a second incident directed at you. Is that correct?
I'm sorry.
Were you about to tell the jury about a second incident directed specifically at you?
Yes, sir, I was.
What is the date of that?
That would be about the 18th on a Saturday evening
Of August?
of August. Yes, sir.
Okay. I want you to hold up on that one for a moment,
Okay.
because I want to get a little bit of a chronology going here. Were you part of or subsequently learned of an incident where your son was falsely accused of having a gun?
Yes, sir. That was on Sunday the 5th
Okay.
of August.
Now, as a result of that particular accusation, did that cause you and your son to do anything in terms of being able to have a record for the future because of this false accusation?
Not quite. I know what we did, but I'm not quite sure if that's the answer you're looking for.
Well, I'm not really looking for any answer in particular. I'm looking for what happened. But specifically, I'm referring to the security camera. As a result of that incident, did you all purchase and install a security camera?
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. In fact, that evening after the incident settled down on September the 5th, that afternoon, I left about 4 o'clock from my son's house and went home, got cleaned up. My wife and I went down to Radio Shack at the suggestion of Sergeant Thomas House with the Titusville Police Department. He said, "Why don't you install a security system?" We will do that. So we went down and purchased a security camera that had night vision, the daytime vision. It also had audio. It could record audio up to a certain number of feet away. And we purchased that, took it back home, and installed it.
Okay, let me talk about the installation of that for a moment. Where did you install it on your son's house? What was the location you all decided was best?
The front of my son's house faces a little bit northwest. We installed it under the eave on the northeast corner of the house. We installed it so that it was looking Sir?
Go ahead. Tell
Okay.
them why you installed
We
it.
installed it so that the left side of the camera picture was along the northwest corner of the house, and then there were a certain number of degrees that the camera would seek on the from that line over to the right side, and we installed it so that it was covering his front yard.
Okay. Now, why did you pick that particular view instead of the front of the house?
Because most of the activity was occurring in the front yards,
When you say activity, activity involving who?
involving the Hembrees, Piciors, Blakes, the children, all of the two addresses over there across the street.
Okay. So was the camera pointed toward those residents in particular?
Not those two residents. It was more focused on Billy's residence, but in the way we had it set for Billy's front yard, it was taken in from the vacant house across the corner to Gary Hembree's house.
Okay. Now, specifically,
You may.
I want to show you what's been marked as Defendant's Exhibit A. You recognize that particular flash drive?
Yes, sir, I do. It has my signature on it, and I'm the one that put it there.
Okay. Now, did you view there's two clips on that particular flash drive, is that correct? A clip from August 11, 2012, and a longer clip from September 2nd and through the 3rd.
Yes, sir.
Did you view those?
Yes, sir, I
Are
did.
they true and correct copies of the video surveillance that from the camera you installed and a copy of what had been turned over to the police?
Yes, sir. These scenes and the words on here are the identical ones that were on the original hard drive that I copied to blank hard drives to give Mr. Eisenberger one, the state one, and I think you had an extra one, but I'm not sure. But I did the copy. Those same scenes are on this one. They haven't been changed anyway.
Okay. This particular version has not been enhanced or brightened up by anybody. This is actually the raw footage from the camera. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's
Okay.
not.
You've viewed all of those, and they're true and correct and complete.
Yes, sir. I did.
I would offer Defendant's Exhibit
All right. Without objection, then, it'll be introduced as Defense 1 in evidence.
Okay. We'll probably get around to playing some of those clips a little later. But now I want to talk about the times that you were actually there and personally observed conduct directed either at you, your wife, your son, your son's wife, your grandchildren. Okay? So we'll start and try and take it more or less in chronological order and have you tell the jury about conduct that you personally observed. Okay? We're past the 5th now, past I think the 7th or 8th. There are other times where you personally observed things directed at one of those groups of people by either the core, Hembree, Blake, Cass, Daniel, or I think those are all the players, or their children.
You're asking about an incident that involved all of us together witnessing?
Okay, I'm talking about things that you observed with the gang directed towards your son's family or you.
Okay. I'm not sure if it was, I think it was August the 18th, the Saturday afternoon. My son called me. We were out eating and wondered.
Repeat what somebody else said, just what you did and you observed.
Well, I'm starting from the point when I observed it, when
All
I
right.
started observing. Asked me if we could come by the house. He said, somebody's called the police. I said, okay. So we went there. And when I got to his house, I observed 2 police cars in the area. I observed my son standing out in his yard, and I observed all of the 6 adults and six or eight children over at the other side, on the other, across the street. The police officers were talking to them across the street at that time, and I walked up in the yard, said hello to my son. A few minutes later, one of the police officers came over and came up in the front yard with where Billy and I were standing.
Again, don't talk about with somebody else.
Right.
So,
And then,
there's some conversation with the police officer.
yes, there was conversation with the police
So I
officer.
want you to repeat that.
Okay.
We'll try and address some of that later. But after that conversation, were any arrests done or any action at all taken by the Titusville Police Department to protect your son and his family?
No, sir.
Now, after the police officer left on that occasion, did that calm down the situation? Did the activity of the people across the street diminish?
No, sir. Did
What
not.
actually happened after the law enforcement left?
After the officers left, there was no diminishing the activity across the street.
Well, I mean, describe to the jury the type of activity that was directed toward your son's family and you, even after the police had been there and talked to everybody.
There were numerous taunts. There were threats by the adults to take golf clubs, to use bats, machetes. There was a big jumble of noise over there, and you could pick out those particular words, among others.
Now, how long did it take them from the time the police got out of sight to start this behavior back up?
I would say they didn't even get around the corner of Smith Avenue, the west corner of Smith Avenue, and they started back up again.
From your own personal observation, did the presence of the police or the intervention of the police have any effect on the people across the street, or did it just embolden them?
None, sir. I observed Roger Picior throw his hand up in the air, point, and then I observed a police officer get in the car and leave. I don't know what that meant, but that's what I observed at that moment.
Okay. And then, as you already testified, almost immediately later, they started back with the taunting, insults, shouting, etc.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Now, this conduct that you observed on that particular day, was that unusual conduct by them against your son?
Object unless it's from personal knowledge. He's indicated he's had 2 incidents.
I will lay that.
Sustain.
Include that. I'm
Sustain.
talking about all these things. I'm talking about things that you personally observed. Okay.
Yes, sir.
You personally observed it. That's the category. If I forget to add in from your personal observation, I want you to understand. I don't want anything that you heard from anybody else or talked about with anybody else. I want to talk about things that you personally observed.
Okay.
Okay? Based on your personal observation, was this kind of conduct that was directed against your son and his family by the Core, Hembree, Blake ensemble unusual?
Yes, it was unusual. Yes, sir.
And what was unusual about it?
It was unusual. It was unusual because I had really never witnessed this type of activity or group mentality of this nature at anybody in my law enforcement days, and I was using that as a standard. And I had not seen that kind of behavior before.
Okay.
I was amazed.
And perhaps I did a bad job of asking the question. Was this an infrequent occurrence of conduct like that from your observation?
It was not infrequent during that time period.
Okay. Were there other occasions that you recall specifically that you were personally around where your son and his family were subjected to this kind of behavior?
I can't think right offhand of, with the exception of that afternoon in the yard, there was one evening I went over and was walking with my son and his dog
Tell the jury about that.
before he turned in. In fact, I made a habit of going over every evening and walking with him so that he could walk his dog and then turn in. We were walking east on Smith Avenue. Smith Avenue makes a U shape, a circle. We were coming back up the west side, on the north side, going west, and Gary Hembree approached from the cross section, and he had another young man with him, and he was walking one of his dogs. I told Billy, let's go, let's just keep on walking, and we did, and I thought maybe if they don't stop, we need to turn around and go back. But they did stop, and they stopped just right on the edge of the intersection. And we went and crossed the intersection and went on about our business and went to his house. There was one other one. We were finishing a walk one night.
Well, before you jump to another one, I want to stay on that one. You said Gary Hembree came up. Did he do anything other than just come up and watch you all on that particular occasion?
Yeah, that's all he did, yes, sir. He just,
okay.
He walked towards us and then stopped. So
Okay.
we kept walking.
All right, so nothing in terms of the exchange of threats or anything occurred on that?
No.
Okay. You were about to tell us about something that struck your memory?
Yes, sir. It was either Monday evening, Monday the 6th in the evening, or Tuesday the 7th. In the evening, I went over again to walk with my son while he was walking his dog. And as we finished the loop around Smith Avenue.
Objection. Can we get a more accurate date as to month? And because we've gone from the 5th to the 7th, and I just want to make sure we're talking about what month we're talking about, what day.
Okay, well, are we talking about something that occurred in August 2012?
Yes, sir. I apologize. It was August the 6th in the evening after dark, or August the 7th in the evening after dark.
Okay.
We were about to finish our walk, came around the corner. We were passing on the north side of Gary Hembree's house, on the north side of the street, away from his house. And I could see Gary Hembree standing out in the moonlight under one of the trees. And as we got towards the intersection, I observed Roger come running across, and he had his arm up, and he was waving his arm. And I couldn't see what was in his hand. As he came running towards the sidewalk, I turned around to face him in case he was going to come and do something, which I didn't know at that time. I had no idea. And at the sidewalk again, Roger stopped, and then I could see that he didn't have anything in his hand. It was just his fist he was holding up. So I felt no fear at that time. I felt no threat. So I turned around, and my son and I kept walking to his house.
Yeah, well, did he say or do anything other than this approaching you that verbalized anything?
Yes, he did. Thank you. I heard him say that he was going to, I need to take a bat to the old man's head.
Okay. But the fact that he didn't have a bat at that moment
Didn't bother me at that time.
threat. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. Now, did you ever observe anything in terms of one of these people's dogs? And
I didn't personally observe it, but I viewed it on the videos.
okay. As a result of viewing on the video, did you have concerns about the use of the dogs as a weapon against your son?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Now, the police were called on that occasion, is that correct?
They were called that evening, yes.
Okay. And did you personally have any conversation with the law enforcement officer regarding what you had viewed on the video and in terms of asking them to view it on the video?
Yes, I did.
Could you tell the jury about that conversation from your point of view?
I told the officer that, in my view, not only from my law enforcement days, but it's the same today, that the dog issue is an aggravated assault. It's a felony, and a person can be arrested without having the officer present. And I offered the videos. I said, can we make you a copy of the tape? Can you come in and look at the video? We haven't changed anything. We make you a copy of it.
Did the officer accept that offer?
No, she did
Did the
not.
officer
She said,
make any arrest or take any action to
No, sir.
protect your son and your family?
no, sir, not that evening.
Okay. Now again, is this something that your son was aware of, this interaction? I think he was personally, from your testimony, he was personally involved in that. But were your concerns and your belief that those actions constituted crimes shared with your son?
Yes, sir, I did. I shared that with him.
Okay. So that was part of his thought process on September 2nd through the 3rd.
Yes, sir. And he was standing there with the officer and I when I did that.
Okay. Now, were you personally frustrated by the lack of response that Titusville Police Department was offering? for
Very frustrated, yes, sir.
Why?
Extremely. I guess because in my experience, we had instances similar to this back in the days that I wore the uniform, and we were able to fix them. We were able to make them go away, however you want to call it. We were able to get them settled down. We were able to get the people back on track again, using common sense, if nothing else, and maybe some suggestions. But I'd never seen one allowed to go this far, allowed to go for 27 days.
From your personal observation, did the Titusville Police Department take any action that you deemed was protective of your son or your family?
In my personal observation, no, sir.
Okay. Now, you've testified that that was a source of frustration and concern for you. Did you have discussions with your son where you expressed those concerns?
Yes, I did, sir.
Okay. So that was part of his thought process as well.
Oh,
Your concerns about the police response and their ability to protect your family, that was part of his thought process as well.
yes, sir, that's correct. Yes, sir, that's correct.
Actions speculative.
Related predicate report.
Overruled.
Okay. Now, we've already had some testimony. I won't go into a whole lot with you, but you were also there. You had actually filed an injunction based on the actions against you as well. Is that?
I'm sorry, sir, I didn't quite follow that one. A little slower.
I've been into the injunction. You had filed
Okay.
an injunction for protection, asking for protection for you and your wife against part of the Picior, Hembree, Blake group. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
And your injunction was called up, I won't say heard, it was called up the same day as your son's injunction, your daughter-in-law's injunction, and the Hembree, Picior, Blake injunction. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
Now, again, we've heard some testimony, but were you allowed to actually present any evidence in support of your injunction on that day?
I was allowed to speak before the judge with Mr. Picior president. That was my injunction was against him for coming across the yard the day it
I
rained.
understand you were allowed to speak. My question was, did the judge allow you to actually present any witnesses or any of your supporting evidence?
Oh, no, sir.
Hearing?
No, sir.
Okay.
He would not hear any of the video, audio, and he wouldn't hear the police officers that we had subpoenaed.
And he ultimately ruled on a legal issue and denied your injunction. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
And was that frustrating to you?
Yes, sir.
Did
Very
that
much.
cause you any concerns about whether or not you and your son could rely on the system, including the court system, to protect you, your son, and his family, your family, against the Picior, Hembree, Blake group?
I felt after the injunctions were disallowed, I felt like we were now at the mercy of the street, that we couldn't count on the system to help us anymore. We'd done everything legal we could, and now we have to go back home and play nice. And it started right after that again.
Okay. Now, during the time that between the request for the injunction and the hearing on the injunction, both sides had temporary injunctions in place. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And part of that temporary injunction required, at least your perspective, your son to turn over any weapons he may have in his possession to law enforcement. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And did you assist him in doing that?
I assisted him by taking his weapons from him.
Okay. And during the time of the injunction, did you hang on to the weapons?
Did I hang on to him?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay. And was there ever any effort on his behalf to try and circumvent the injunction and ask you for those weapons back or anything of that nature?
No, sir, he never did.
Okay. And that's consistent with the way you had raised him, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, after the injunction was denied and the prohibition against him possessing firearms was no longer in effect, did you ever return any weapons to him?
Yes, I did.
And when did you do that, and why did you do that?
That was the evening of August 29th, 2012, after the injunctions had been denied. I went over to his house. I had the weapons in my truck. My son called a police officer, and we had a police officer sitting at the table with us, and he was asked if he could have his weapons back. And the officer said, certainly, you need to be able to protect yourself. And I went out and got his weapons and gave them back to him.
Okay. The mark is 6/128. Do you recognize that particular exhibit?
Yes, sir, I do.
How do you recognize it? How do you recognize it?
I recognize it because my son had a Beretta Model 92 that he had purchased from somewhere, and we both went out shooting one day. I shot it, he shot my Smith & Wesson, and we passed them back and forth and target practiced with them. And I'm familiar with that gun.
Is that one of the weapons that was returned? To your knowledge, was that weapon still in the household on September 2nd?
I didn't catch all of that, sir.
To your knowledge, was that weapon, the .357, still in your son's household the night of September 2nd?
To my knowledge, it should have been.
Okay. Now, you were over at your son's house earlier on the evening of September 2nd when his family actually was out to dinner. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Did anything occur in terms of interaction with Picior, Blake, Hembree, or any of their gang that evening?
There was no personal interaction between myself and any of them that evening.
Did you observe any activities on their part before your son got there?
Yes, sir, we did. It appeared they were having a party of some kind.
Okay. At that point in time earlier in the meeting, were they directing any of their bile toward the house where you were sort of
No,
watching?
no, sir, they weren't.
Now, you were present when your son returned from dinner, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And did you observe upon his return any change in their behavior?
No, sir, not really.
Okay.
Our car was still parked outside, and we didn't really hear anything.
Okay. Now, at the time around you leaving, did you observe any comments directed toward you and your wife as you were leaving?
I didn't hear any myself, no, sir.
Okay. Now, if the surveillance shows some activities kind of directed, well, let me ask you like this. Your hearing is not the best, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, I want to ask you about earlier that day, around 8:16, did you and your wife have any interaction with Titusville Police Department out or around the area of your son's house?
Yes, sir, we did.
Why did you have that interaction? Was it because of concerns about things that were happening, or
Action,
what?
lady.
Go ahead. Okay. I'll rephrase.
Rephrase.
Why did you have that concern?
We knew that my son and his wife and children would be coming home soon from their anniversary dinner over at her folks. So we went to go to his house and stay there as long as we could while they got in the house safely, and when we could leave. On our going south on Lane Avenue, we passed the northbound or the north loop of Smith Drive, and just past the north loop of Smith Drive on Lane sat a police officer. I pulled up next to him pretty close, and my wife rolled down the window, and we made contact with Officer Roman.
And what did you tell Officer Roman?
I didn't say much to Officer Roman. It was my wife that talked to her.
Okay. What was,
If you know, sir.
as a result of the concerns that were expressed to Officer Roman, was any action taken?
After we left Officer Roman's, I drove up in my son's driveway, and we entered his house.
Did you observe any action by Officer Roman while you were there?
No, sir.
That's all.
Cross-examination?
Yes. All right, I wanted to start with, you talked about incidents that you observed. I want to make sure I understand. Now, the first incident that you said you observed was August 5th?
A little quieter, please, sir.
Okay. First incident that you observed at your son's neighborhood about this was August 5th?
Yes, sir.
Right. And there's your son sitting on one side of the street
Yes, sir.
and a group of people on the other side of the street?
Yes, sir.
Right. You were present for what had happened before you got there. You were not present.
Oh,
You did
no,
not see what happened before.
No, sir.
You did not know how your son had acted before you got there.
No, sir, I didn't.
Was your son upset?
Yes.
All right. Were the people across the street upset?
They didn't appear to be as upset as they were upset. I look at upset as something that your demeanor is completely different.
How about angry?
Yes, they were all angry.
All right. That's what I mean by upset. They were angry with each other. Right? Your son was angry with them,
Yes,
and these people were angry with your son.
that's correct.
Right? And your son was angry because he was losing the chickens, right?
At that point, I hadn't heard anything about the chickens
Okay.
when I first showed up.
Now, I think you were talking about incidents that happened to you involving Mr. Picior, Roger Picior.
Okay.
And there were two of those, right?
There was, yes, sir. Two of them caused the injunction.
Right. Because you would have put everything that Mr. Picior did in your petition for an injunction, wouldn't you, to get the injunction?
Yes, sir, I did.
Did you put everything in there?
I put both incidents, yes.
Right. And would you agree that the first incident you described, I believe, was April 12th of 2012? Or do you remember?
I don't remember it being the 12th, but I remember it being very, when the injunctions were filed by the other side on Monday the 6th.
I'm talking about the incident.
Which incident?
Well, let me see if this refreshes your recollection.
Okay.
First, just looking at that, you recognize your handwriting? Oh, I'm sorry, August. August 12th. That's your handwriting?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And is the date, the first time you said Mr. Picior had done something to you was on August 12th? Is that what that is, that number?
Yes, that is.
Okay.
That is the 2 dates.
All right, so that, and you wrote this back closer in time to when all this happened, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, you did put in there that from the 12th through the 22nd, he's taunted, picked at, and verbally abused you and your son.
Yes, sir.
Now, were you talking about you, or were in that statement were you actually talking about things you heard from your son? You understand the difference?
You mean things I heard from my son directed at Picor?
No. No. You mentioned a specific incident on the 12th where Mr. Picior did something to you.
That must have been the day it rained and the sand washed down and I was out shoveling. That must have been that day.
Okay. Were you working at that time?
Working?
Like employed, or were you?
Yes, I was employed, yeah.
Okay. So you would be working during the day? In August 12th, 2012?
I was working during the day, yeah.
Okay. Okay. And then the other day you described was August 22nd. And that was the incident where you're walking the dog with your son.
That was that evening, walking the dog.
And you were with your son, right?
Yes, sir.
And he threatened you with a baseball bat.
Yes, sir. I got the dates wrong.
Okay. Now I want to talk to you about law enforcement. How many times were you over at your son's house that you saw law enforcement?
Wow. That's a tough question because I don't recall exactly how many times out of the numerous days I was there that I saw law enforcement.
And I'm just talking about between August 5th and September 2nd.
That's correct. Those were the only days that I went over there, those days to help him walk his dog, or to be with him while he walked it.
Okay.
And I do remember seeing him on occasion, not every day though.
All right. Now, when you went over on September 2nd, you saw an officer right around the corner
Yes, sir.
sitting there?
On August the 2nd, at about
September 2nd.
September 2nd,
Yeah.
about 8-something in the evening.
You said you went over to your son's house before they arrived.
That's correct.
Okay. And that you saw an officer parked in a police car a relatively short distance away, did you not?
That's correct.
All right. And that was about what time?
About 8:15, 8, whatever time in the evening.
Okay. Were you aware or had you seen law enforcement coming through the neighborhood about every 2 hours?
No, sir.
And you watched that video?
I'm sorry.
You watched your surveillance video that you authenticated?
Yes, sir, I did. As a matter of fact, if you would like me to explain, I went down to the police department and got a copy of the log.
Okay, that's not what I'm asking. Because you testified that you watched that video, you watched the whole thing, and I'm interested in the between 9 and 12:40, 9 in the evening till 12:40 the next morning. So from September.
Did I
2nd.
say I was not interested?
No, I didn't. I'm asking you, did you watch that whole segment of time
Yes, sir.
that's been introduced? Now in evidence as Defense Exhibit 1. This.
Right. Yes, sir.
Right? And you said you watched all that.
Yes, sir.
All right? And did you watch it and see police cars driving by in front of your son's residence twice during the 4 to 5 hours that this would have been playing?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay. So you did see that law enforcement was driving by frequently. I mean, this is a residential neighborhood, right?
Yes, sir.
So you knew they were around. They were there when you drove up, and you saw that they drove by a couple of times during the surveillance video. Did you not?
During those Small pieces, yes.
All right, I'm talking 4.5, 5 hours.
In that particular video, yes.
Now, I just wanted to be, and I know that you can't hear me. I want to make sure I understand. Were the children and the dog with you and your wife, or were they with someone else on September 2nd? The children, and I'm talking about your grandchildren.
My grandchildren on the evening of September 2nd were with my son and his wife.
Okay. Your son and his wife didn't go out to dinner without them?
No, they took them with them to have anniversary dinner.
And the dog?
The dog was at their house.
Okay. Well, I have a question about that because, you know that same video I just talked with you about? That's the exhibit? Don't we have your granddaughter get the dog out of the car and bringing it into the house?
May have.
So I'm trying to understand, we see you coming from, it looks like from the street. You actually in the house, come out and come in with them? I'm trying to understand if 3 cars didn't drive up, you being one of them, or 2 cars drove up.
Okay.
You understand my question?
Yes, sir.
Because watching the video, your son and your grandson get out of the truck, and your daughter comes from the driveway with the dog in. We see you as well. We see you in that shortly after that.
Okay.
So what's the situation? Are you already there? Did you come with them? Do you remember?
We were already there.
Okay.
We were already there, and I can't really remember if we had the dog on a leash and went down to meet him.
Well, the dog didn't appear to be on a leash at all. It appeared like he'd
Okay.
gotten out of the car and kind of gotten away from your daughter a little bit and heading towards the house.
Okay.
Do you recall watching the video and seeing that?
I do, but that didn't really stick in my mind, no, sir.
Okay. All right. Now, it wasn't long after they arrived there that you're out by the car in the truck, spending quite a bit of time whispering to your son. Why were you whispering?
Why was I whispering?
Yeah. Why were you
Probably
whispering?
cautioning him to be careful.
Okay. And why were you whispering? I mean, the microphone, you guys are right there, and that's about the only conversation on the tape is if it's not picked up as a conversation between you two.
That's because I wanted it to be between him and I. I wanted him to be safe, and I wanted his family to be safe.
Okay. Were you telling him to do anything that night?
No, sir.
Okay. Well, did you tell him to arm himself and set up in a nest over there next to the fence?
No, sir. I did not.
Now, had anything happened, and I just want to be sure, well, let me ask it another way. I think you said on direct examination that you hadn't heard anything other than there was a party going on directed at you, your son's family, that particular evening.
During the time frame we were there, that's correct.
All right. So there wouldn't have been anything for you to tell your son they had done that day.
That's correct.
Right. So was your son upset about the neighbors from anything that had happened that day when you were talking with him?
My son was, he was upset that he felt like that they were going to do something that night.
And he's telling you that at the pickup truck while you're whispering?
We talked both inside the house and out that night before we left. We were there probably just about an hour before we left.
Right. Well, you remember you sat out by that truck kind of looking and talking for a while, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
Now, your son had a trailer parked in that same yard where the truck was, right?
Correct.
And he was getting ready to move out of that house starting the next day, right?
Not the next day, no.
Okay, is that what that trailer was there for?
That trailer was there for him to start moving when the paperwork went through for the new house.
Okay. All right. So he knew he was moving, right? He knew he was moving out of that house.
He knew that it was coming up, yes.
Okay. Happy about that, wasn't
Yes, he was. He was sad at the same time.
he? Well, he was angry, wasn't he?
No, he was angry that he was having to leave his house just to keep his family safe.
Well, didn't he decide that he was leaving that house as soon as the chickens left? That's when he decided.
As soon as who left?
As soon as the chickens had to go, that's when he started looking for a new house.
No, it isn't. No, sir.
That's when he decided that he was going to leave.
Not from my recollection of conversations with him.
Did you feel that your son had some problems controlling his emotions before this happened?
Yes.
And how long had you observed him having that issue?
Since about 1991 or 92 when he came home from the Army.
You were with your son when he attacked Mr. Hembree, were you not?
I'm sorry, sir, when he what?
Attacked Mr. Hembree at the courthouse.
Yes, I was. I was right behind him.
Did you know your son would have snapped Mr. Hembree's neck if he could?
No, I can't perceive I can't predict his motions.
Did your son appear angry that day?
Yes, sir, he did.
And did he appear that he was angry at Mr. Hembree?
Yes, sir, that day, that was the day the injunctions were dismissed.
And that was that Wednesday or Thursday before?
It was the 29th of August.
And this event happened just
That was when that happened, yes.
a few days later.
The injunctions were denied on August the 29th. And August the 29th was when he decided he needed to move away because the activities across the street ramped up to a greater level than they had been all month.
Well, were you there?
Yes. I was there that afternoon.
So we talked about an incident on the 12th and the 22nd, and then the 29th, right?
Okay.
And so were people upset because your son had attacked Mr. Hembree?
What people?
Well, I guess you said everything ramped up. You would agree
Well,
that...
Can I explain it in the way I saw it?
Okay.
All right.
Well, when did you get there? Let's start now. When did you... That was not the question.
Let's be clear on the question.
I'm going to walk you through this, and you guys explain and tell me. You were at the injunction hearing on the 29th.
Correct.
And then after the injunction hearing, you saw your son attack Mr. Hembree at his car.
I did.
And after that attack, where did you go?
We got my son in the car, and my wife and my son and I went to our house.
So you didn't go back to Smith Drive right away. You went over to your residence.
Correct.
Right? And where was Mrs. Woodward? Barbara.
Barbara went to her house with the children.
have been 1960 Smith Drive.
Yes.
Did you go with your son over to 1960 Smith Drive?
Later on, we did. We'd changed clothes.
All right. And so this is after this incident where your son has attacked Mr. Hembree has occurred.
Yes.
So you got over to Smith Drive approximately how long after this attack had occurred?
I don't recall the exact time or even a close time. I know we changed clothes. I don't remember if we even went to eat before we went back over to his house. It was sometime in the afternoon. We left my house, we changed clothes, and we proceeded to his house.
All right. Had you already gotten his guns for him?
The who?
Had you obtained his firearms for him?
He had them somewhere. I gave them to him back on the 29th.
That's what I'm asking you about.
Yeah.
You know, all this is about the 29th. Every question I've asked in the last 5 minutes is about the 29th.
Okay.
After, because the 29th is when your son attacked Mr. Hembree, right?
The 29th in the afternoon.
Right. And so I'm trying to go through that process, and I believe we've gotten to your residence, and your son, the defendant, is there with you.
Right.
Correct? And is that when you obtained his Beretta firearm and the Ruger 357 firearm?
No, sir.
Okay. So, did you go back to his residence first? Or did you stay there and he went home without you? What happened?
Let me make sure I'm getting this right.
29.
We left my house, and I'm pretty sure we went back to my son's house after changing clothes. My son hadn't changed his clothes because he didn't have anything at my house. So we went to his house so that he could go into his house and change from his suit into street clothes. We left and went to supper.
You went to supper.
My wife and I can't remember if we had any family with us or not.
Okay.
We went to supper.
The only person I'm interested in right now is your son, William T. Woodward.
Okay.
Is he left at the house?
As far as I remember, yes.
Okay. All right. When you got to the house, did the neighbors say anything to you?
But yes, they made numerous comments, not only to me but to my son.
Right. And did they sound like they were angry?
Yes.
And this is after your son has attacked Mr. Hembree?
Yes.
Did you leave your son at the residence and drive away and go to supper or whatever you had to do?
After we dropped him off, yeah.
Okay. And is we meaning you and your wife?
Yes.
When did you bring the guns back? How much later?
Probably, it was dark, around 8:30 or so.
Okay. And so these were his guns anyways, right?
These were his, yes.
When you brought the guns, was law enforcement already there?
Yes, there was a police officer at his house.
After you delivered the guns to him, did you stay or did you leave?
Stood around for another half hour or so and talked with the police officer and my son. And then I left.
Okay. Was the police officer still there when you left?
I think he left before I did. Pretty sure.
I don't have any other questions.
Any redirect?
Yes, just briefly. Mr. Woodward, this attack that Mr. West is referring to, you observed Gary Hembree taunting your son before they had the physical altercation?
Yes, I did.
Is that what provoked your son's response?
Yes, it is, sir.
Sustained.
Did you see
Granted.
your son's reaction immediately after Mr. Hembree taunted?
Yes.
There
I was
no
watching.
pause in between that.
I was watching my son. There was no pause.
Now, when you all returned to your son's home, were there similar types of taunts and threats that had been occurring on a regular basis in the preceding days before the 29th?
Yes, sir, there were.
Unless he has actual knowledge, that's something he did. Unless he's speaking from personal knowledge, I object.
All right, the same, Mr. Eisminger, if you just make it clear to his knowledge.
Sure. Based on your personal observation, were they making the same kind of taunts and threats against you, your son, and your son's family, like they had been consistently since the 5th?
Yes, sir.
Unless it's within his personal knowledge.
I asked the question based on his personal knowledge.
My personal knowledge, I witnessed them running across the yard, making the same taunts, threats that they had been making that month.
Any recross?
I wanted to ask if the taunt that you're referring to that Mr. Hembree did to your son was taking his camera out to videotape.
No, he spoke words to him.
So it wasn't him taking his camera out?
No, sir, it was spoken words.
Okay, so you didn't see that? You didn't see him take his camera out?
I saw him with the camera, and I was able to hear the words because he said I'm loud enough.
Oh.
Any other questions?
Question.